but it's going to go at 8, so we've got 7 minutes. I think that's the idea.
Oh, cool. Nice. Nice to have a like schedule going.
Yeah.
Schedule. Wait, Saturdays. What would I normally do when we weren't in this situation? I think once a month I would go out to the where is it? Down south. Swing and Soul? No. Gosh, I've already forgotten the names of the events that I went to. The
Oh,
Lindy
really? Yeah.
swing dancing. Yeah. Rhythm Lounge. Rhythm Lounge. Yes, the Rhythm Lounge. Once a Saturday per month, I'll go there. Good
Um,
times.
now, I don't know if it's going to show that we're going to be live soon, but I hope it does. Brr. Oh, I actually thought it was going to be live a little bit later, but apparently we're live now.
Oh,
Um,
are we?
yeah, apparently. Let me just
Hello,
Google.
people of the internet.
Hello, everyone.
Okay.
We're absolutely live. Let me just check if we're actually coming through on the YouTubes because I'll go to live control room. Let's just see. It's going to open another page. Is that right?
Have a cool backdrop. You've got like the Mandalorian and
Oh, my
like those
background. Yeah,
cars and
I love
and
it.
a piece of art.
Watch video.
In this video, I'll show you how to set.
I don't get it. It's ridiculous how. Oh, here we go. I think we are live. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Beans Talk, State of the Beans Talk. Literally two fellas talking about tech and gaming. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. We've got a whole bunch of topics for you today, but let's introduce ourselves for those who don't know who we are or who we are. Well, I don't know if you know who I am. If you're watching this stream, that you might know who I am. But welcome to Casper. Casper from Gaming with Casper. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Oh, cool. Thanks for having me, Pat. So I recently started a gaming channel called Game with Casper on YouTube, got the Twitter, got the Twitch going on. So I'm very new to the game. Other than that, in my personal life, I've got a full-time job like many of these people out there in the world. Maybe not so much now because of the current situation, climate that we're in.
Oof. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but yeah, thanks for having me, and hopefully I can collaborate a little bit here on the channel and offer some news to the public and just my personal opinions in a lot of the matters.
Awesome. Well, me and Casper have been friends for what, nearly 5, 6, 7 years or something like that. 8 years? No, nine
Yeah.
years.
Oh, wait,
Jesus,
now I think
nearly.
we're rolling into a decade
We're
soon.
rolling into decades, so we sort
Yeah.
of been dealing with the same sort of stuff, playing the same games and watching the same movies and so on. So hopefully we can give you a distinct enough, I guess, opinion on what's happening these days. But also, if you guys don't know, it's Techman Pat, doing lots of videos about the NBN, I suppose, and a lot of tech stuff, so covering that. And I too have been working a full-time job, but from home, which is, I have to say, has been fantastic. A lot of people are like, oh, working from home, it's tough. There's a lot of distractions, but I think there's a lot more positives than there is distractions. So that's just my opinion. But what we're going to do today is we're hopefully going to do this weekly. We're going to do a bit of tech about gaming. We've got some news that we found that I thought would be interesting to discuss. And no, we're not going to go singing, Ray. I think, well, actually, I suppose, Casper, you're more of a musician
Ooh,
than me.
get a bit of a duet going on. All right.
Have you
Any requests from the public?
Well, we'll leave that to Ray. Ray's the one that brought it up. So if you suggest
Ray
songs,
Charles. All right.
and actually, Casper has done some songs for some music background for some of my videos. So if you guys ever want to get some music done, he'll be able to help you. All right. Well, look, let's. I wanted to just ask about the last week, how your whole week has gone. This is obviously Saturday, so we're going to try and do this around 8 o'clock Australian Western time. But I think we might need to bring it back for the folks in the East to sort of match it up with their sort of afternoon evening thing. But yeah, how has your week gone last week? What did you get up to?
Oh yeah, so my personal week. Well, getting started with a channel. with a gaming channel. Essentially, it's just myself playing a game, just streaming and talking through it. And what I tend to do is I chop it up a bit and just give people the highlights in the YouTube and try to make it, a little bit comical, a little bit funny and flimsy in the way that, I'm no professional gamer and obviously come into the same issues that most people would, your average gamer. And what I find myself with this going into it is as a beginner, there is this social proofing that you need to undergo,
What do you mean?
and when I say social proofing, essentially I mean that you're out on the scene, nobody knows you, you're like that new guy that just attends the party, but nobody knows who the hell you are. So, you may have these expectations in your mind that, oh, all of a sudden I have a voice or I have a sense of an authority when I come into the, the interweb or whatever.
I
But
suppose.
it's, yeah,
Sorry, I
sorry,
was just
go
going to
on.
say, how amazing is it now that we can actually have a voice because of the internet
Yes.
and basically anything that's online allows random idiots like us to have a say.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so you're out there and you think that, oh, I'm just going to obtain subscribers, this is just a natural progression. But you need to, I guess, obtain their trust. They need to kind of get an idea, okay, what's this guy about? What is he going to do for me? Because at the end of the day, there's a level of entertainment that you need to provide. You
Yeah.
need to create a bond as you would in a friendship. So it's as if they're getting to know you, but through a filter. So you need to treat it as you are talking in front of a crowd, like you attend like a seminar or something. And my first streaming experience on Twitch felt like that. It was quite nerve-wracking, even though I'm sure there was probably nobody that actually viewed my video or my stream live. But it just felt like, oh, okay, there is an audience there, so I need to behave in a certain manner, or I feel the nerves kind of coming up, and um, it really creates that scenario.
Yeah, I get exactly what you mean because I think when I first did a video and put it out on YouTube, I was like, oh, I watched all these other people do it, and I said, oh, I'll put something out, but it didn't get any views. It was completely ignored, and it's kind of depressing to sort of do that. So I suppose streaming is such a different thing than I suppose putting up YouTube videos. I think nowadays because most streamers are expected to be entertaining, great voice, great skill, unless you're obviously a beautiful young woman, and that's just ticking the right box. But and people have
Yeah.
this really perfect bullshit meter. Like they can tell if you're being honest or if you're not. And if you're acting like like an idiot or sort of trying to put on this sort of fake persona, I think people can catch that
Mm.
out pretty quickly. I just had a message from Hassam. Yes, I was going to talk about my fall today, about my week, but
Oh,
in a moment, it was pretty bad. We were supposed to do this stream yesterday, but I just couldn't. Yeah. So, what I suppose if anybody's asking, what do you need to get actually started with streaming? I suppose because you just literally did that week. What are the two things that you need
yeah.
to get streaming? Like, it doesn't matter if it's gaming, but just in general.
For me personally,
Yeah.
so I suppose the basics to get started, you need to have some sort of a camera or access to a mic, so that you can interact with the audience. They need to have visual cues. They need to be able to hear you. I suppose there's that human element to it because just watching a game on its own, it's only half the I guess half of the form of communication or half of the form of entertainment. Um, and I suppose the higher the quality of this visual fidelity that they can see you with, the closer they get to it, the more they get out of it. Um, and I also think in instances where you are gaming or part of a gaming community, and if there's more than one individual present, there is a sense of being I guess, invited it into a circle of friends. And so any viewers, they feel like, oh, look, I'm getting to know their world and I feel like I'm a part of it at the same time as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
these are some of the elements, that are going through my mind. And what I find in that first experience of streaming, of how strange it is to be just this one human being that's talking and not having a response in return. Because when you, Pat, and myself, when we're gaming in a room or we're sitting on a couch, or for anybody else out there, there's that experience of, you interact and it's just that continuous back and forth. Whereas in this, it was like, okay, I'm talking about the scene, I'm talking about what's on my mind, I'm talking about what I'm experiencing, but there is no feedback.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just like, you just kind of feel like, you're a bit of a madman at the same time as well.
Yeah, imagine
Yeah.
talking to yourself like all those only
Yeah.
kids who they used to play by themselves and talk with themselves. Oh, I'm gonna kill you. That would have been, that's perfect. That's your general streamer, is
Yeah.
somebody who can just talk to themselves like
Oh, yes.
non-stop.
So maybe there is a level of insanity that goes with it that actually
You gotta be
it
different.
pays to have that. Yeah.
What I was gonna say is we're getting some couple of questions in the chat. So I guess the idea is that we've got some topics we want to talk about. But if you guys want to ask any questions, and I know Axe jumped in and asked about the Battlefield 5 thing, and I'm more than happy to talk about that, because I love Battlefield. And
Yeah, what is this Battlefield 5 thing?
So guys, put your questions below. You can see them popping up here, and we'll answer them as soon as we can. Just know that this is a delayed thing, and we can't always just catch them out, so we'll try and answer them as soon as we can. So Casper, if you haven't heard, remember Battlefield, remember, let's say, 1942, and
I loved it, yes.
Oh, that was the best. That was the best.
Vintage gaming.
Then what came after that? Battlefield 1942. There was some add-ons. There were like the secret weapons of World War II. Then was Battlefield 2, which is weird because then Battlefield 1 came out. But Battlefield 2 was the bomb. Like, that was just, it was
like modern
weapons.
warfare type, right? In Battlefield 2?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
so then,
okay.
and then Battlefield 3 came out. I loved that. I used to play in competitions with a bunch of guys from the East Coast, and we used to get together as a squad and then compete with other clans around Australia. And that was absolute fun. Every Sunday, 1 o'clock, I'd have to be at the computer. I have to be, because I've got to be there for my squad. So, it was such fun. So anyway, look, I guess pushing on history, Battlefield 3 had a bit of issues when they first sort of started. And then Battlefield 4 was also not a good start. But ultimately, 3 and 4 did really, really well. Like, ultimately, as Battlefields go, they're really good. And then Battlefield 1 was in there and also quite well. What's happened with Battlefield 5, and this is a World War II version of it, was that they decided to get woke. And I'm sure you can realize what that involves. But they put a lot of stuff to make it, like really in today's sort of PC police.
Yeah, what kind of elements did they add to it to stay relevant in this woke world?
So I'm sure you know World War II. Both of us studied it a lot in our high school. We went to the same high school, if anybody's wondering. But so they put, this is really stupid. They put women, not putting them in, but the idea of making it about it, making this like a central thing, is that they put women in World War II in the scenarios. And it was just, people were just complaining about it because they're like, well, it's not realistic and it doesn't make sense. And then there was women who had, and I suppose not nurses or anything like that, but women who had like no hands with like metal little hooks and stuff and jumping out of buildings and stuff. It was all people expecting this sort of like realistic shooter, which Battlefield tended to be, and they made it into more of a modern warfare arcadey thing. And I think it wasn't necessarily that people were upset that there were women in it. I think they were just upset that it wasn't the Battlefield they expected. And the only thing I noticed was when I was playing multiplayer, I heard women screaming, and it's something you don't hear. You don't hear women screaming. And I suppose this could be because we've been
unless you've been married for a long time.
well, let's just put that to the side. But as a gamer, you don't hear women screams, and when it's so, they've put in some really chilling screams in there when women dying, and it's off-putting. But men dying, screaming, not a problem. Apparently, nobody cares.
Right. So there was this level of stimulus that you were like, "Whoa, this is just unexpected." I'm not used to hearing a woman.
Yeah.
Like, the screams of death. Basically, is that what it is
That's
in the
exactly
game?
right.
Yeah. Right.
And so, what they try to do is EA try to keep putting up updates and sort of saying, "Hey, we're gonna make it better." And there was a lot of issues. Like, we could spend an hour just talking about this, but they were doing a lot of things to try and fix it. And what happened was they're not really getting any community feedback. They weren't listening to the community feedback, so they ignored the community. And your game's going to die if you ignore your community that's playing it. Because if they're not playing it, they're not sharing it with their friends, they're not buying the game, and they're not buying expansions and spending money on the game, on the microtransactions, right? So came out with the last update, and they said, "Nah, we're done. We're cutting all updates. No more. We're done." And they've just thrown in the towel, and people are like, "Well, this wasn't unexpected. Here we are." And I think people expected EA to put a lot more effort, because they did with 3 and 4 and 1. And comparably, 5 was just a mess. Like, the amount of attention to the community was terrible in the 5th release. So that's why I think the 5th one's just died, and the whole issue with it is gone that way. Like, you never played 5, right? You never did.
No, I've never played it. No. I remember seeing some footage and just being, amazed by the visual fidelity of it all, by the graphics and how it's improved over time. But I didn't know the political angle that perhaps it was pushing, and perhaps they thought innovative change of what they're bringing into it and redefining a formula. So I thought maybe keeping it fresh, but it sounds like it blew up in their face, because the general public, or the player base that they had, was very much used to a set specific tone, which they didn't bring back.
And I think, I guess part of it is that a lot of people expect to have the same thing over and again with a little tweak. Like, people don't like massive change. Look at Apple, right? Apple releases a phone that's not very different from the last one. But if they
minor
did
iterations,
minor perfection, iteration, and if they made something that's completely different and scary, people wouldn't buy it. They just be like, "Oh, this is too different. I'm scared. I want to go back to the old." And still, you get a little bit of the population saying that, but the majority sort of go, "Oh, that's close enough to what I remember. It's a little bit different, And hey, when's the last time you complained about having a 3.5mm jack on your phone?
Never.
Well, exactly. And Apple just removed it, and they were done.
Wow.
I suppose that's in any case, back to Battlefield. They're working on Battlefield 6. They're going to put all their efforts into that. We have no details about what it's going to be about, but all I hope is that DICE and EA, they learn something from this, because if they don't, it's just going to be another repeat of Battlefield 5 and maybe any other game that EA has released. Like what was that flying one that they put out?
Flying EA game?
Do you remember? And it failed miserably. Oh, maybe somebody in the chat can let us know. It was the little robot suits that you'd get in, and then you'd go. And
Is this Titanfall?
No, not Titanfall.
No?
There was a game, and I think the opening scene was beautiful jungle. You'd run, and you'd get into this suit, and you'd sort of fly down and
shoot.
Yeah.
I know it's a new game.
Yes, and it's
newish
failed.
game.
It's failed
It
miserably.
failed so hard. Like, I remember seeing it at the store for like $3.
Yeah. It wasn't Fallout 76, because that's another.
It's like a Destiny type game.
Yes, it was an Anthem. Thank you.
Anthem, yes, thank you for that.
Yes.
Anthem. It
Anthem
bombed
is
so hard.
Just a bomb. I have it. I bought them, and I played it for 30 minutes. I know it's 30 minutes.
Didn't they give up on the project?
Yes, they're throwing in the towel too. They released some last updates, and it was just a mess. And I just can't believe it. So sorry, the chat is coming up real late, and that's why I'm sort of you guys aren't catching up. So
yes, I see.
So in any case, all right. Well, look, let's jump into our first topic, and this one was from you, I believe. Is this the Tech Radar one about the Xbox Series X? Oh no,
Yeah.
PS5 versus Xbox Series, and which
All
console will
right,
win?
yeah.
Yeah,
Look, I just briefly, I guess I wanted to touch base on that. I mean,
yeah,
it's public news and it has been for quite some time right now. But it's just very interested between the disparity of the performance
yeah.
between the two, right? We've got the hold on, I'm just going to go back into that stream because you've opened it up there. Yeah, so it just talks about the various architecture differences between the two. And I suppose the only edge that it looks like that the PS5 has on the Xbox Series
Mm,
X is
mm.
the solid state drive, which is like, that M.2, which performs more than twice as fast as the Xbox Series X. And
Oh
because
right.
the PS5 has about 10.3 teraflops of computive power, as opposed to the 12.1 of the Xbox Series
Mm.
X. But yet, what's interesting is that a lot of the developers that are coming forward are saying that the PlayStation 5 is a lot easier to develop on. I think they are
Really?
saying that the SSD plays a very important part to them. Now, I don't know if that's going to reflect on the actual gaming experience. Um, what's interesting with this being brought into the equation is that we are going to less and less have situations where we're walking through corridors, we're waiting in an elevator, we're crouching through an object, we're walking through a windy road. Like those elements were created in the PS2, the PS3, and also the PS4 days that are no
Ah.
longer going to be around, which means, obviously that's also a plus for PC gaming because that's going to reflect on that too.
Are you saying the
With a
the loading sort of trickery where you go into an elevator just for the sake of loading the next level?
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
So those elements are not going to be present. I say this because this was a highlight of Mark Cerny's speech when he did about a month or two ago, when he
Mm.
did like an unveiling of the PlayStation 5. And he brought up, I think it was Jack 2 as the example, where he showcased the level design. He had like a map of it and how basically how windy it was, like a
Mm-hmm.
maze, like the whole design. And it was done so because it would give time for everything to procedurally generate itself in the background as you're walking through this extremely windy map. So I think map and gaming development is going to change a lot as well.
Yeah.
How they're, just going to create the landscape. So
So you think that just because of that sort of SSD, and I read about the Xbox, they also were going to include a very fast SSD. Like it's let's just be sort of like non-techie around this. Like this one's fast and this
sure.
one's fast. Do you think that
Yeah.
little speed is going to make that much difference? Because at the end of the day, if it can still load it in at a reasonable speed, like at what point does it say, oh, it's not, it's too fast or too slow? Like at what point do we say it's, fast enough?
Yeah, true. I know they're very fast, both of them. The difference seems to be obviously it plays in Sony's favor by quite a bit because we're talking, I think, 2.4 gigabytes per second versus something like 5.5 gigabytes per
Right.
second
Okay.
on the PlayStation. And they're both still very, very fast. But when you have almost double the speed, what would that mean for development or performance?
Mm.
But then you've got Xbox with a more powerful GPU, far more compute units, but running at a lower speed, lower
Mm.
base clock, as opposed to the PS5, which is going to run at like a colossal frequency. Like we're talking, what is it? I think it's like 2100 megahertz or something like that.
I'd have to point out, Maddie just mentioned something.
Yeah,
And I'd have to agree with him. He
yeah,
says that the SSD speeds are going to revamp the way open world games are going to be made, because you're gonna be able to load a lot more details into the world straight away. And then I think that I remember a little trickery that used to do. There used to be a little cone of vision you'd have as a the character in the game, and as you
yes,
swing around, it would load all the details in, but it would make sure that whatever you're looking at is fully loaded. And then the rest of the environment only loaded partially. Like you'd have the land, maybe the specific buildings, but not like all the little items. So to lessen the resource burn on the GPU, it would do that. And now with a faster SSD, they might be able to pack a lot more in to be preloaded while you swing that cone of vision around. So something like Cyberpunk, which, oh my goodness, we're going to have to do a stream of
So
Cyberpunk.
excited for that game.
That game is obviously open world and it's first person. So we're going to get this sort of cone. And you can play in third person. Is that right? Are you going to be able to change camera, or is it just 100% first person? I think it's 100% first person.
From the last thing, yeah, that I've heard was it's 100% first person to the point where I think they've changed the actual cinematics to first person, which I don't know how that's going to work.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, look, I'm all up for the first person experience, but even in Oblivion or like Skyrim, you had the ability to go third person. Like that was just a thing. You could do that. And I suppose,
Yeah.
well, anyway, I'm hoping that you can do it. But if it's first person, how are you going to feel about playing on a console? Like, are you going to do it on PC, or are you going to play it on console? Because you're going to get the
I'm
PS5,
still in
right?
two minds. Yeah, it's absolutely like I think the PS5 is probably going to be a few months out from the release of that game, and then probably the updated or upgraded version of that will probably be a few months down the line as well. I mean, CD Projekt Red have been very tight-lipped about talking about the upgraded versions and when they're going to release, because they want to have great success with the current gen releases, where their market base is, 200 million gamers or thereabout in the current gen. So they really want to hit those sales first before I don't think they're going to resell the package for the Xbox, right? Because Microsoft came forward and they said, we're going to have an upgrade and it's not going to cost you anything. Don't know if that's going to be the same thing for Sony, but I think it would be a bad move if they didn't do that.
Right, okay.
Charging the customer again for an upgraded version of the game. And knowing CD Projekt Red and their history of really appeasing the fans, I think they are going to do their very best to actually have a great outcome for the people so they can maintain that loyalty and that love for them.
Yeah. Okay. I suppose that, I guess, again, that's the choice of the game developers when they develop that game. With Sony and Microsoft, they're obviously huge powerhouses that can even create their own games. Like with all the exclusive for Sony, apart from the devices, and I guess we're comparing this sort of weird nuance of, well, this is more powerful than that. This has got 5 gigs faster SSD. Apart from that, and I suppose including we've got Sony's got exclusives. What do you think Xbox has that makes it a little bit different? And maybe you can do this sort of like, what do I choose? Like, this has got Sony exclusives. This has got, what does Xbox have?
Yeah, so I think, and we have seen this over the past couple of years, that Xbox has really been aggressive. Phil Spencer, the front man of Xbox, he's been hitting up studios left, right, and center, making sure that they're creating powerful partnerships so that they can create exclusive content for the Microsoft brand. And we know of 2 releases at the moment, which is Senua's Sacrifice, the sequel, and the other one is the new Halo game.
Oh, okay.
Whereas the only thing that we know of so far for Sony is the Godfall game, which I believe is also on PC. It's going to be a day and date release on PS5 and PC. So, because PS5 has been so tight-lipped. I mean, Sony has been about the PS5. We don't even know what it looks like yet. So
that's interesting. I'm really fascinated by Sony's choice not releasing what it's going to look like, because it's like this. Xbox released it, right? They said, hey, this is what it looks like, because it's just a box. Like, it's just a box, right? So then Sony had this decision. They had 24 hours to go, do we release what ours looks like to steal the spotlight from Xbox? Or do we just make it even more secret and then hold off completely?
I know, it's like the ball's in their court. It's like, how are you going to respond to that? And they responded with silence. which I thought was very fascinating.
I thought it was great. I mean, look, I thought it was a good way to do it. At the end of the day, um, sometimes showing less is more. And now people are talking about it. What does PS5 look like? And you've got
We're curious. We're
yeah,
dying here.
yeah. People are
Yeah.
creating 3D renders. Like people are spending hours of their own time, not related to Sony, creating renders of how they think the new Sony device would look like. I think that's really cool. I think the fact that Sony has taken this way where their marketing is being created by not their marketing team but other people. I think that's funny.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
It's so true. And I think that Sony is still in a place where they're just that, that cool kid in the playground that, you know, effortlessly has that coolness about them. Whereas I think Xbox is that underdog that's really fighting for that popularity, trying to, re-win the crowd. And I truly think they're going to do a fantastic job
Yeah.
because of all the work that they've been putting in. So it it would really be very important for Sony not to slack off on the release. Like this could be their downfall if they slip up.
Oh, yeah. And I just saw a message from 1H Music. He said, mentioned PlayStation VR. Is that something that you think is going to be the difference? Because obviously we haven't heard from Xbox with their VR, and they have Microsoft VR. Like they have those like
Oh, yeah.
goggles that do what is it called? It's not VR. It's not purely VR. It's like including in the room. It lets you see things on your room. It's like semi VR. Shit, I can't remember the name right now. But do you think VR is going to play a big game in the success of PlayStation 5? Like, is there going to be a PSVR 2,
Yeah.
as Maddie just said? Thanks, Matt.
There will be. I think all of us are kind of in that mindset that we're confident that they will release one. The sales haven't been phenomenal when we compare it to the consoles. We have over 100 million compared to about mm, 5 million or so units sold. So it's
Wow.
about
Yeah.
5% of the player base who own Sony consoles actually buy a VR.
Yeah. Agreed.
So I think we will see an improvement of that over time as people are trying new things. They're dipping their toe in the water and saying, hey, what is the experience of this like? Because I know the first iterations of the VR, they would have low frame rates and low resolution, which probably is not the optimal experience, making you feel a little bit dizzy or woozy for some people out
Yes.
there, maybe not everybody.
So I
And
played
yeah.
Alex VR, and
How was that? Yeah.
I guess I cannot say enough how if that game came out as the first game for VR, how much better VR would have had on the start. That runway, that first moment. If Alex came out at the same time, this is Half-Life Alex for those who don't know what I'm talking about. So Half-Life is the closest we're going to get to number 3 for now. That game is mind-blowing. And I don't get motion sickness like I used to as a child, and I'm surprised I don't anymore. After a few drinks, I can't play it, sure, but I couldn't. If everything felt so natural in the game, picking up the guns or picking up items from the floor, fighting with enemies, moving around, and the environment was so well designed that I sometimes spent moments just sitting there looking at stuff. I'm just like, this is a box. It's an electrical box. It's got little switches. It's got little buttons and things. I was just, wow. Like, if I wasn't self-aware that I'm wearing a sort of helmet type thing, I don't know if I could tell if it was real or not real. Is so well designed that I was so impressed. So I think generally VR is going to be this sort of side hustle that's going to grow and grow and grow as the
I think
technology
you're
grows
right.
with it.
It's kind of like the
Yeah.
electric cars, like we're seeing that grow and grow, but it's still kind of, it's still not the majority. It's on the rise. It's probably like the early inception of computers. Now it's in every
Ooh,
household.
that's a big call. That's a big call. You reckon there's going to
Yeah,
be a VR unit in every household?
it's possible.
Well, I mean, if PlayStation, like, you remember Connect, right? From
Yeah,
Xbox? That was a disaster. And they
that
bundled it
was a
with every
disaster.
single Xbox. Like, they sent it out. So I wonder
And
if,
maybe I think it's the experience that's going to push it, you know?
yeah,
Consoles are so popular because it's the experience that pushes it, that being the titles that we have on sale, hence why we have the popularity of the PS4. So could that mean we could have exclusivity for particular VRs? Like maybe the Sony would have their own exclusives on there,
Yeah, you.
you know?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's totally possible. And sorry, I just brought up. I'm not sure if you can see that page, but brought up a little comparison between Xbox
Oh
and
yeah.
PlayStation. And
Mm.
obviously, the price is going to be a big thing. And in
Yes.
Australia, price is going to be a major issue because first of all, we're low against the Australian dollar right now. Like we're really low.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's 65 cents to the dollar.
yeah. I mean that's
Mm.
yeah, that's not good. So whatever they building and comes over here, it's going to hit our wallets pretty hard. So that's the first problem for us in Australia. But everything else, like the games, I don't think the price will be it won't be so significant. Like could be like $10 difference because every game will be priced the same. Like it'll be $60 for an Xbox game and $60 for a like a PlayStation 5 game. But as we sort of go down this list, we've got the difference is so small. You've got 3.5 gigahertz on the AMD Zen 2 for PlayStation 5, and you got 3.8. Like, is 0.3 going to actually make a difference? I don't think so. I certainly
Yeah,
don't
I
think
mean,
it
on
will.
paper it looks like 10%, right? But in the calculation scheme of things, what is that? Maybe 5 to 7%? And then
Yeah.
in frames per second, we look at what, like maybe, I don't know, 6 frames difference between a game. Will that be massive? I don't know. Maybe,
Well, if you're
maybe
running at
small.
4K, right, and
Hmm.
then and you're only hitting 30 frames, 6 frames is below playable.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you'd hope that they're all running at least at 60 frames. Like this video right
yeah.
now, we're streaming at 60 frames. It's not
Oh,
that
okay.
hard. But it's
It
not.
looks like 12 frames for all the lag.
Well, it's 1080p, but 60 frames. But it is one of those. I wanted to touch upon a point that the guys have made in the chat. So
Yeah,
there is Xbox has, and I think, and I'll just pop us back to this chat. I think Xbox has done this really cool thing where they've actually gone and the whole screen's moved. They've done this thing called the Games Pass, right? Where you pay
yeah.
$5 for basically access to not all, but these Xbox games. What do you think of that? Like subscription-based access to games, do you think that's gonna take off? Like think Netflix, but for video games.
See, this is interesting. And I've listened to a few people actually talk about it on different chats before about how they feel about the game Xbox Pass. Is that what it is? Games Pass?
Yes,
Xbox Games
Xbox,
Pass? Yeah.
yeah, something like that.
Um, because there's so many things to choose from, you're almost in that similar situation when you're flicking through Netflix, you're about to have dinner, and you're like, oh, there are no movies that I could watch. I mean, there's absolutely nothing to watch because you're just so spoiled for choice. But when you have something that's far more streamlined, there is that mentality. There's a shift in mentality where it's like, oh, okay, I have these two great games to pick from. Should I go with that one or that one? Which is, the probably the primary reason why we have exclusives trickling down, per quarter or per, so and so set amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's amazing. I think it's incredible, but um, maybe we're just overwhelmed with the amount of choice because it's
Yeah.
still fairly new, right?
Well, look, it's been going on for a while, and
Like
I've 12
2 years?
months, no, 12 months
12
to
months?
2 years,
Yeah.
I think.
Okay,
And
yeah.
I've been subscribed to it for at least 8 months, and
Yeah.
I've played 3 or 4 games, and I've played 3 or 4, and then one game quite constantly from that. And
Right.
because I've got one of the old Xboxes, the one I think one of them, I actually find that instead of going out to buy a game, I just end up playing something that's already available for free. And
Mm.
I guess it's not available for free because obviously I'm paying for it, but it's so much easier to get into a game when you have this pass. Obviously, you don't own the game, and they might remove the game one day from the subscription, and you won't have access to it. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like, I'm subscribed to it. I get to play it for like 12 months. Am I going to go back to it? If I do, maybe I'll go buy it, and maybe it'll be cheaper at that point. But I guess what I've noticed is that the games that come up to that games thing, the pass, is actually older games. So wait, I get to play all these games that I never tried before because I never bought them when they were new. So, yeah, I mean, why not? And I think Sony is going to do something similar. I mean, they're doing something similar with PlayStation Plus, where they do like 2 free games a month. But I think they're going to have another service on top to try and make some money. I mean, it's always about money. Nothing ever happens without money being involved. So I think Sony is going to do this subscription thing too, and it's going to be the exclusives. It's going to be exclusive, and you're going to pay like $20 a month. Australia. We're talking Australian here, by the way. Australian, $20 a month. You get to access to every single exclusive that comes out, plus some bonuses for current games, maybe obviously online multiplayer, whatever it is, and that's it.
See, I wonder, I get this feeling that they might not do that with new exclusive releases. They're going to be a little bit more conservative in the sense that, they really want those to rake in the money. Those are their theatrical releases, the blockbuster, their Avengers movies, the big Marvel movies. So this is how they want to make that ton of cash on. But I think games that are, 6 to 12 months older, I think they would populate it onto this equivalent Games Pass type scenario. So I don't know. I feel like Sony is banking on the PS5 to be their powerhouse of revenue, where I think Microsoft has been in a position where they can take it or leave it, which is why they can allow for such a sacrifice. How much is it? How much is Games Pass?
At the moment, it's $4.99, I think. Like
$5 a month.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because they have so many other massive, like avenue streams, like revenue streams, right? They've got so many of them. That Xbox is probably something like 5 to 10% of it, whereas for Sony, it's like PlayStation's probably like 30 to 50%.
Yeah,
like it's huge. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, yeah, we'll have to wait. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody's gonna subscription is the future. I don't think we're gonna.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I think even now, like games becoming downloadable is a huge thing. Like the fact that you can download it. Like Steam started it, but consoles have always liked the disc thing. But like even Xbox came out with a discless device. I think there's going to be a PS5 in the future with no disc either.
Ooh.
Because delivering you a game, and especially now with COVID-19, I can deliver you a game through the magical interwebs, and you don't have to go out into a store and you buy it. You don't even have to order it, but you will pay a higher price. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but if you buy a game from the PlayStation Store, it's more expensive.
It's so much more expensive. It's like the difference between like, I don't know, $70 to $100. It's like $30 difference, which is a lot of money. And there's something about, there's a little bit of something about a physical copy, just having that ownership. I think that just, it's a mental, intrinsic human thing, It's like I own it. Whereas if it's like in a digital world, it doesn't have that same sense of pleasure of owning something.
Yeah, that is a big thing. I think a lot of people would agree with that, and let us know in the comments below. Do you guys like actually having physical copies of video games? I mean, I can dig up a lot of, like, a stack. Like, I've still got them from like 2005 onwards, like when I actually could afford games. I've got stacks and stacks of disc cases, and actually I can't even play any of them anymore because I don't have a CD drive. I don't have a DVD drive in my
You don't have the CD drive.
I don't. Last time I tried to play a game, I actually brought out this old DVD drive I have. I have it in one of the drawers behind me, plugged it in, and had to put the disc in, install it, and then I just chucked the DVD back in, right?
My God, it belongs in the Antique Roadshow.
Yeah, exactly. We've got another good topic, I think. I really wanted to touch on this one when I saw you send that to me earlier on this evening. If we just jump onto there. So NVIDIA. I mean, this is a huge thing for PC gaming. So obviously this is a bit of a rumor mill. So friends, if you guys are watching, remember that this is obviously a little bit of a rumor mill. Take whatever it is on here with big giant grain of salt. But look, RTX 3000, we know the history of RTX 2000. I think it's been terrible. I think the recent release was horrible. They went from creating like the RTX, let's start with 2080, right? The 2080 was only, 10-15% faster than the 1080? And then they added RTX on top of that, making everything just crash. Because RTX, I think, is overall a fantastic idea. Like improving the graphics fidelity and adding more realism to a video game is always the aim. And RTX is like that next level that just came out of nowhere. And then we've been building these graphics cards to have a whole lot of frames, but then suddenly RTX is like, hello, I'm gonna wreck all those frames, and and then you've got like 30 frames in a 60 frame game that you usually have. RTX came out of nowhere, but it is beautiful. So we had this weird thing, and none of us own an RTX card. Let's just sort of keep that in mind.
Let's put it out there. We're all poor.
But RTX came out with Super, and then they came out with their TI, and then they replaced all the cards with the Super version, and it's still 2080, but they added another name on the end. I thought that was ridiculous. They should have had Super straight from the start. It shouldn't be a mid-generation thing. Like, how ridiculous is that? The prices were extraordinarily high, and I suppose for Australia they were enormously high. What did you buy your 1080 for? What is it, 2-3 years ago?
Yeah, I bought it for 1,200 Australian dollars. I bought it on the day of release, so I basically pre-ordered the thing.
Right.
They were just flying off the shelves because of, the performance difference. You said 10-15% between the 1080 and the 2080, whereas the 980 and the 1080, we're talking 20 to 30%.
That's right.
Which was huge for the time.
Yeah.
And it also got me thinking, oh my God, we're getting into that era where we could do 4K. But I think it was just on that edge where it was it could do 40 frames 4K. It couldn't do quite 60 yet.
Yeah, that's right. It wasn't a 60 card yet.
Yeah, it wasn't a 60 frame 4K card yet for some games, but not your top of the line. No. We're talking Witcher, which I think came out 2015. Yeah, Witcher 3, 2015. Whereas this card came out 2016, the following year.
Yeah.
So it couldn't run in 60 frames. But man, it was a good card, great card. $1,200, and I think what did the 2080 release at? What, $1,600?
Yes, and that was that wasn't not even there was a non-NVIDIA version. It was the free, the free version.
The free version, yeah.
It was the version that
the sample.
Was like a ASUS or EVGA. You know how they do the manufacturer version? So you've got NVIDIA, which was this is the NVIDIA card, and then you get the lower versions. They're not lower versions, they're just different manufacturers, and they have ability to sort of really change the pricing. And 1,600, but I think 1,800 was the NVIDIA version. It was ridiculous. And comparably, I bought the 1080 Ti it was a little while after the 1080 came out for $900.
Oh my God, what a steal.
And it was the NVIDIA version. It's still in this PC, so it's about 3 years old, and it's performing so well. And that TI is now comparable to the Super 2080, 10%. Obviously no RTX, so I can't play Minecraft in RTX, but ho and behold. But if you look at this, we've got the 2060 Ti. So just the 2060 is going to come at 510 Australian dollars. I think that's really reasonable for a 2060.
Yeah. How well does that perform again, the 2060?
Look, the 2060 is obviously better than the 1060, and it is RTX, so it can hit things. But you'll be able to play 1080p at high frame rates, and that getting discounted to 510, I think, will probably be the positive here, and hopefully that will sort of get sold into those medium to low end level gaming rigs where people are on a budget, want to spend some money. But this is really good for them, because as the new RTX comes out, the price of those lower ones should go lower. But remember, people are also going to start selling their RTX cards on Gumtree, and they're going to be your second-hand cards, and they're going to be the old versions, not the Super, not the new released ones. So I think consumers are going to have a much harder time to pin down exactly what version of card they want and how they actually want to spend their money, because they're going to have to try and decide. These are going to be stupid decisions because people who are selling them are going to try and get the most they can. And I don't think they'll know how to compare it to all the other things that are coming out. I think NVIDIA screwed the pooch on setting up a clear step-by-step of what it is. And do you know why?
Why?
I was wondering when you would say why. There's no competition from AMD. They have no competition.
Yeah.
NVIDIA's doing wherever the hell they want. How
That is
crappy
true.
is that?
That's why they've created these, and I say this because I was listening to this channel called Moore's Law is Dead, and I've been listening to him for the past couple of years. At first, I was convinced that this guy was, he was a spokesman for AMD, that he was pushing for AMD, but he saw where AMD was going and what they were doing. And he was talking about the strategy of NVIDIA and how they play in the field and what they've been doing for the past few years. And the prices that they've been just jacking up with their products are insane in comparison to the production costs,
Right.
It was something like $300 to produce a 2080 as opposed to the $700 sale. I think it was it $699 US that it released. Oh,
Yes.
$799.
$799.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
we're
US,
talking
yeah.
$500 in profits, right?
Yeah, it was
And
ridiculous.
which is why NVIDIA's stock price is so astronomically higher than AMD's. I mean, AMD is now on the rise and they've been catching up. And
I don't think they're catching up with cards. I think.
in terms of performance,
yeah.
not yet. Yeah, not yet.
What's
Absolutely
the
true.
highest cards? These pro cards, ignore I'm just sort of sharing PLE, by the way.
Yeah.
Ignore these cards because these are all pro cards. They're comparable to like the NVIDIA's pro lineup for like development and whatnot. But then you have the 5700. How
XD,
long
yeah.
has that been out for? And look at this. This is PLE, right?
Last year,
Out of
right? It
stock.
came out last year.
Yeah, but it was a rebrand of another card. But look at this, out of stock. Oh, there's one in stock for Eastern States, out of stock. Order is required, out of stock. They're not even, I guess I'll look at this and go, okay, this shop is not stocking AMD cards. Look at this, none of them are in stock. Nobody.
Is that how you feel, or?
No, that's
No,
what
no.
I judge it by.
That's what you judge it by, yeah.
If a shop
See-
is not selling the cards and not ordering more because they're not selling, then they have no competition. NVIDIA has no competition.
Yeah, but the AMD cards have been branded, I guess, as the 1440p winner. They're like the really good 1440p cards for performance,
Yeah.
price performance ratio.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they do not hold the crown, and I don't know if they will in the coming year, but I think that's their goal now because they have so much market share in terms of just the
CPUs.
presence and because of the sales. The CPUs, the CPUs are doing well. They're now dominating. They're going to be in both the Xbox and the PlayStation 5 in terms of the GPUs and CPUs. I mean, the API is going to be in there. APU, is that what it's called? The APU?
Yeah, so I think we
right,
recently found out with your CPU that we couldn't boot it because there was no APU built into the. Which one did you get? The 380?
3600X.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. There you go. Yeah. So that's a good transition, by the way, guys. We're going to talk about AMD and Intel. So these two have been warring at it for a while. Would you say AMD is now higher than Intel? Do you think?
Yeah, like I don't want to say, like top dog, but like I think they've taken the lead. They've just been kind of biting at the heels of Intel, and they've attacked them with the level of architectural research that they have been doing. They've seen how far behind they were, and they're like, okay, the next piece of hardware they were going to develop is not only going to have to match them, it's going to have to surpass them. And I really think that they went back to their lab, and they have really come up with
Back
some
to the
great
lab
products.
again.
Yeah, back to the lab. And they understood, I think they understood their consumer base, what was required of them, and they've come up with some great products. The processes that are great for development, for gaming, all around. They're good. And I think for the most part, they seem reliable at the same time.
So this is the first AMD card you've ever owned. Oh, sorry, not card. Sorry, CPU you've ever
CPU,
owned.
first one I've ever owned, yeah.
And
So I can't compare it to their previous performance. All I
no,
can say is what other people have told me and what the reviews say about the past products. So yeah,
which haven't been good at all.
I know I've heard really bad things in the past from AMD.
So
Um,
I talked. We had this conversation the other week when we were talking about AMD CPUs, and I said, "Oh, I have one of those AMDs that from a long time ago," and I
yeah,
couldn't remember the name, and
the
I was
pre-bulldozer, right?
yeah, that it was. Well, I can't. I was trying to find a list here. Desktop processors, consumer list of AMD processors. There we go. So I was back like a long time ago. So I had a um, 75. No, this is 99, maybe even before. That's 2003. So I had an Athlon FX. So let me just zoom in on there.
Right.
And I remember that was, and Sempron, I had a Sempron too. So I built a Sempron for my dad because the 64-bit was disabled and we bought the Sempron CPU for another computer. And it was just to run like just Windows, you had to format
It's
it as
Word,
fat. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Word.
Minesweeper.
Cards, Solitaire. You had to have that.
Oh yeah, Solitaire. You have to have that.
But it was only supposed to run, non 64-bit code. So we had to format the hard drive as FAT32 and then only install 32-bit Windows. And at that time, it was that turning point when Windows 64-bit was just coming out as standard and you had to format all your hard drives as NTFS and it was just a mess. But then we had, the Athlon 64. So I was on AMD all the way, and not because they were great. It was because they were cheap.
That's what I was expecting you to
Yeah.
say. They were cheap.
They were super cheap. So I'm trying to Phenom. That's it. Phenom. That's the last one I did. Phenom. So it was, I think it was this.
God damn, that's like 12 years ago.
Yeah. So 2013. Yeah. So this range there, because I remember swapping it out in 2012. So I had the Phenom. I think it was the X3. Maybe it was the older one. The X. Oh, sorry, maybe the X4. I actually really can't remember right now. But if I turned on a piece of software and then I decided to turn another piece of software on, nah, no thanks. It'll just lag out. It's just terrible. I could play some games, but it was as long as it was a single operation, right? If it was just a one thing on my screen or one thing in the background, I couldn't do it otherwise because it would just crash. It would not crash, but just lag out. And then I switched to the 4690K. That was Intel's i7, the best CPU I've ever owned. I bought it for $480. 2 years later, I sold it for $400.
That good.
Yeah, that good. People were still buying it at a high. They were still wanting that CPU. And I was just like, well, if I'll go to the next one. It's a little bit better, but because we were moving from DDR3 to DDR4 at the time. So, I had to buy a new CPU anyway because, everything else needed to go. So I just couldn't believe how good it was.
I saw somebody, sorry, just to cut you off, somebody mentioned Heroes of Might and Magic in the chat, and he's like, oh, it caught my attention. Great game, great game.
We used to play that as a LAN. Like that was the only one we could get running up on one PC at the time. Remember, we used to play it on one and just switch mouse.
Oh, yes, Hot Seat. Oh,
Yeah,
good
hot
stuff.
seat. Isn't there a new one? There is a new one, right?
I
Recently,
think there was a new one that came out maybe a year or two ago, and it bombed super hard. Like people were like, "What's happened to this franchise?" Like Heroes of Might and Magic 3 was that was so good. I'll never forget it. The nostalgia is strong with that one.
do you remember when Diablo 3 came out?
Oh yes, day one it was
It
they messed up.
It was up and
They
down,
messed
up
up.
and down. The game came good in the end. I think you played it a lot. Do you still
I did, yeah.
gem it?
I watched it grow over time, and I was content with the direction they were taking it in, but it just didn't quite live up to the Diablo 2 days, unfortunately.
Right.
So I think Diablo 4 was on the horizon. So
So we've heard.
got my hopes up, because of what we've seen. It looks good, looks cool. I mean, they're really taking it back to the dark tones, the really bloody and grim, the appealing to that adult audience once again.
Oh yeah. Well, I hope so
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, gamers are adults, and there's a lot more people playing games now than there was 20 years ago. Because
Yeah.
it's not a nerdy thing to do anymore. You know how it was looked down upon. I've always found this. I used to go out on a party and be like, "Yeah, I play video games." They'd be like, "Why don't you just you're a nerd." I'm like, yeah, but watch me scull this, glass of whiskey with no ice. Yeah,
Yeah,
it fixed the
it's
whole
strange,
problem.
right? There is one activity in your life that you enjoy, and all of a sudden, because of that one activity, people try to box you in, or to understand you, they put you into something,
Yeah, well, they
into
had to,
that. Yeah.
and
Mm.
back then streaming wasn't huge. Like you didn't have like all these gaming stars, going off and making millions on Twitch, and you didn't have this. Well, you didn't really have what's his name? What's the guy? Felix, PewDiePie. You didn't have PewDiePie, who was
Yeah.
cool and was playing video games. And you can probably see from the first video he ever made to the last one, he's grown quite a bit and grown out of that. But, when I was young, I got my games from people who are 10 years older than me because I'd say, hey, I want to play a game. They'd be like, well, there's this. And like, how else would I find out? I remember, because we used to live in New Zealand, by the way, if anybody's wondering, we went, both of us. And I don't know if you guys know a shop called Pack and Save. They used to have
Great store.
it's such a good store, right?
Yeah.
It's like Coles and Woolies, but everything's just like flat packed, like not the food, right? But just everything's
Yeah.
on these like weird as
It's like
like
wholesale.
yeah, it's like you're in a warehouse, like Costco.
Costco.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was you didn't have to have a like a what do you call it, like a thing to get in, like a membership or anything like that.
Yeah.
So you'd go in, we'd stand there in line, and I used to walk up to this like table, and they'd have all these magazines, right? And do you remember those magazines? They used to come with a demo, like a demo disc.
Oh my God, yes. Are you talking about the original PlayStation magazines
Yeah.
with
PlayStation,
yeah,
there was
and
the
PC
PC Gamer.
magazines?
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a PC magazine, and they came with demos, like software that you could have, and all sorts of stuff. And then you could read up on the latest games, right? You could say, oh, that's a new game coming out. Oh, I'll play that. Oh, there's a new RuneScape thing. Like, those were the days. But
I feel like we're talking pre-internet days here now.
well, I think I was younger. I think dial-up was the shiz
Dial
back
up.
then. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is that was the only way to find out what the new game was, like what was popular. So Diablo 2, Diablo 1, and 3 obviously later on. But those two games were at this point where you couldn't even get it from people. Like you'd have to know somebody who's 18 buying it, and there's a hard way to get it. And nowadays it's so accessible. I know kids that are young, kids like teens, they get games that I would never have access to as a young gentleman. So it's so much more accessible now. So if you release a Diablo 4 or 5 or 6, you're going to get so many more players. But it also exposes you to the older generation who have followed you since day one, and they have a pretty strong voice. Like I remember the whole fiasco with Diablo Mobile, and they came out and they said, well, don't you all have mobiles?
Oh, that was a disaster. Yeah. Is this an April Fool's joke? No.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of hardcore fans of the Diablo series that probably expect a lot. I just saw somebody mention that they just introduced their partner to Diablo 2. How did that go? Diablo 2 is not the
Beautiful
most
classic.
friendly. It's not like when you start off, it's not that friendly. I found it quite sort of difficult to navigate, like as a sort of first time player on Diablo
And I'm
2.
sure the visuals will be off-putting to a lot of, you know, the new generation folk out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great game. I think what it did for its time was it allowed for creativity. It
Oh,
allowed for
absolutely.
room to really develop your characters and to use various tools in the way that you could play the game the way you wanted to play it, not how the developers were trying to streamline you into. I think that's what it was, an
And
aspect of it anyway.
I love games like that. I love a game where you can sit down and there's like the Hitman series. I don't know if you ever played that, but you're giving a task, and the task is here. Let's try and keep that in the camera. And
Yeah.
you're somewhere over here, but you can complete that journey in any way you want as long as you complete that task. And it gives you the freedom to do anything you want. Like you could do sneak, or you could do, all out shooting and whatnot, and get to that last sort of, I guess, the award or the win of the game. I love games like that where you just do what you want. And I hope Cyberpunk lets you do that in some way. It might be hopeful thinking that they would, but it'd be nice to sort of be like, oh, well, if I just sort of walk up this building here and then like throw something down before I run down and start the cutscene and blow them up. I don't know. Like I'm thinking here like something stupid, but it'd be fun to do something like that. Like GTA, you just sort of have freedom of doing whatever you want. Obviously to a point, but I don't know. So Witcher, did you when you played Witcher, did you ever find missions where you could do it a different way than you thought, outside the scripted part?
Yeah, good point. I found Witcher actually. Yes, I felt I could do missions in. I could resolve the issue however I wanted, I think, as much as they could make it so. And there was various options that I could take, which obviously changed the dialogue and the direction of the storyline. That's what I loved about it. And every choice had a repercussion that would later maybe come around and bite me in the butt, or it would actually be a positive. It's like, oh, thank God I made that decision.
Yeah,
It was
very
just so
true.
dynamic and so evolved. I think it was maybe as close as to that artificial intelligence in gaming that we've had in a long time, that you experience it and you're like, oh, this is organically developing in front of my eyes, evolving. I really liked it, and it was just so atmospheric. You walk into a pub after being like out in the woods
Yeah.
for a few hours, and you start talking to all these NPCs and hearing their stories, and just so immersive.
I think Witcher was obviously one of those games that just blew everybody's mind. And speaking of blowing minds, I think it's time to blow this pop stand.
All right,
We've
let's
been
blow
streaming
it.
for an hour, and I thought an hour would be probably a good time to get through some of these topics, but we did not get through.
Yeah, I think we got like two topics and then went on a side quest, Witcher
Yes,
style.
Witcher style. Get out. So, well, thank you very much for everyone who's watching. We're hoping to do an hour like this, just talk about the tech and our past lives of chasing video games from magazines. And if you guys are keen and interested to see some PlayStation streams online, and check out the links below for Gaming with Casper. You can also search that on Twitter, Game with Casper with a C, and of course on Twitch. So how often, Casper, do you do stream every week?
I am doing it on the daily. Well,
Mhm.
at the moment, I'm practicing it on the daily. I hope to do so. I don't have a fixed schedule of it yet.
Mm-hmm.
The highlights can be found on YouTube, and I think they're actually more worthwhile than the streaming itself if you just want to wrap up and if you just want to have a bit of a chuckle of seeing me, I guess, resolve the issues in the various games or the problems, then I think that's probably a good place to start. Unless you do catch me on stream, come say
Oh, cool.
hi, and maybe we can, we can have a game together.
Yeah, very good. And what we'll do next time, everyone, and I can see everybody saying good night, is we'll
Good
do it
night, guys.
we'll do it 1 hour earlier, because I think, yeah, I mean, what is it, 11 o'clock now over East, and we're in Australia, so let's start an hour earlier, or maybe even earlier. I mean, it's a Saturday, like, hey, we can do anything we want. So we'll do that. We'll start a little bit early, and I hope you guys see us next week. I hope we see each other next week, depending on life. But thank you very much for watching. If you guys want to see more Techman Pat videos, then you can see that below and subscribe. And I will put the links towards Game with Casper below also. Thank you very much for joining us for our first stream. I think it went pretty well. If you would like to submit some questions for next week or some topics for next week, please send those through on this chat, and the video that's going to be in the, I suppose, the backlog of stuff, please submit them there. We'll read them through next week. And thanks for joining us, everyone. There's a few names I can point out: Jared, Ziggy, Andrew. Thanks, Hassam, and yeah, thanks, guys. Ak, I think was in there too. Catch you later.
Yeah, AK. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much, Pat. And thank you for everyone else watching.
Thanks, you. Bye.
Bye.